Hello and welcome to yet another Hello America's What's Cooking here on LinkedIn Live. You can find us every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And we would like to encourage all those who are in the audience to give a shout out in the chat and ask any questions for our dear guests today as they come through, because we will be trying and answer your questions as well. Without further ado, please allow me to welcome our guest today, our lovely Melissa Riley from Washington. Hi, Melissa.
Hello, it's good to see you, Sonia.
Thank you so much for coming on our LinkedIn Live chat. Before we get started, and my internet broke off before I even got started. So could you just do a quick intro of yourself and Destination DC?
Of course, of course. You think by this time, a few years in, we'd have our technology all worked out, and it always manages to stumble us. But good afternoon from Washington, D.C. I'm Melissa Riley, and I am the Vice President of Convention Sales and Services with Destination DC. We are the official Convention Visitors Bureau for the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. So really excited to be here and join our friends in the ICA community.
Thank you so much. And let's dive straight into DC is really one of the largest hubs for associations. Does that make your job easier as a DMO to bid for association meetings?
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting question and one that I do get quite often. And it is amazing to have all of this access in our own backyard. You know, the region as a whole is so rich with associations and even corporations that are reestablishing their headquarters here. But it's a bit of a positive and a negative, because not only do you have Washington, D.C.'s DMO right here, but think of all of the regional DMOs from around, especially the country, but around the world, also have representatives in this area. So you couple that with the fact that, we are being so accessible. I think oftentimes people think, oh, well, if I can't see you today, I'll see you next week. Well, if I can't see you next week, I'll see you 2 weeks from now. So when you're traveling on the road, I feel associations have a bit more of an obligation because you've traveled, you're only there for a limited time. Whereas because we are so convenient, we tend to, I think, postpone some of those face-to-face meetings that we would have otherwise had. And then we're also competing with all of the other DMOs around the world who also want to have access to these customers. So our associations could literally be out every single night of the week doing something different with a different destination. So it is a little bit of a blessing and a curse, but I'll take the positive side of it. And I think one of the other challenges is that because people are so accessible to Washington, D.C. proper, it doesn't always mean that they venture into the city. They might come down occasionally for a show at one of our amazing theaters, or if they have family in town, they might do kind of the touristy thing in their own backyard. But, the charm of so many of our cities, and in particular DC, is our neighborhoods and the ethnic diversity that they lend to our communities. And, the fact that DC has the largest Ethiopian population outside of Ethiopia, let's get people into our cities and eat the great food and experience the great cultures that we have to offer. So we just need to, get them downtown more often.
Talking about Ethiopia, my Uber driver was Ethiopian when I was there for the National Business Events Week.
Yeah.
You touched a little bit already on it, but what would be one of the biggest challenges you would like to highlight when it comes to communicating with those associations based in DC?
Yeah, it's we are a highly educated, highly cultured, highly driven region. We have so many people who are continuous lifelong learners. And when we look at communicating, it isn't just from the MICE perspective. It isn't like, just come look at my pretty city. It's not going to get people into the district itself. It's really capitalizing on what's happening in our region that can enhance what they are doing as an industry or as an association. And so when we're communicating, I think one of the keys is you don't reach out when you need something, right? The key to a great relationship is staying on top of what's happening throughout, the span of time. And then eventually it will, prove to be hopefully ROI, professional relationship at the end of the day. But, there is so much activity in our region that, send the information on the new headquarters that are being established here. Send information on, our biotech hub that's happening and what's happening with the venture capital world. We have one of our team members, she puts together something called an inspiration hub every Monday. And she compiles articles that have come out and breaks them down into industry sectors. So if it's a medical association that you're, looking to communicate with, here's what's happening in the medical community in our area. If it's technology, if it's sustainability, et cetera. And she compiles these really thoughtful articles and tidbits of information that you can just say, hey, association, look what's happening in our region. I don't need anything. I just wanted you to be aware. And I think that's one of the keys to success is just that continuous relationship building and information sharing, instead of sometimes just capitalizing on the attractive assets of a city.
That's a great tip already, and a most powerful message we want to leave our viewers with today. And really, it's nurturing those meaningful connections and relationships over a period of time, and not just bombarding them when you actually need something. Really changing that narrative and keeping them abreast of it. But you preempted one of my next questions when it comes to innovation. I see this probably could be considered an innovative approach of the Inspiration Hub. Is there anything else which Destination DC has come up with, especially coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah, the pandemic gave us a chance to pause and think about what we were already doing and how do we maximize on it, or what do we need to get rid of. But one of the things that we had just started during the campaign was, or during the pandemic, was a campaign we called Connected, which is a terminology that a lot of us use. But there's 3 pillars to our Connected campaign, and it's Connected Capital, which is the intellectual capital that I just referenced. It's Campus, which is physical assets in the city that you can work with that add a cultural perspective to meetings and conventions. And then we have Community, which we just launched actually not that long ago. And that's really focusing on so one of the things that I love about the ICA community is, in the United States, we tend to we tend to do things a little bit differently in the MICE arena. And I find that having this global network really enhances some of the things that we do and gives us a competitive advantage from a US standpoint. So when you look at capital, in Europe, you've been doing this forever. When you look at community, you look at examples like the Copenhagen Legacy Lab, and how do we imitation by, it's the greatest form of flattery, right? So how do we take these concepts and apply them to a domestic market, but then one that translates globally? So we really looked at, during the pandemic, people needed to really contribute to their bottom line, right? You've got 2 years of lost revenue, 2 years of lost connections, and having intellectual capital gives an incredible competitive advantage in that it gives access to people or thought leaders that you can't get anywhere else in the world. And we each have these competitive, pockets of intellect in our areas. And we just have really maximized ours and focused on really thriving in emerging sectors in the area. And then Campus actually was activated a little differently during the pandemic, because it was a concept that our large Congress Center, is a defined space. And at this current point in time, we don't have plans to expand it. And we're with some groups in need of additional space. So we looked at like the Longview Gallery, which is an art gallery. We looked at a church who has a built-in theater, right? What do you need when you're in a breakout session? You need theater seats. We looked at one of the associations that has their own like smaller center for innovation within their headquarters building. And we partnered with them to create these really localized activations within these spaces. So you could have breakouts. You could have an exhibitor who takes over one of these, great spaces and really makes it their own. And so campus really evolved from that into also adding social distancing, right? So if you are taxed for space, what better than to, hit 10 or 15 venues that are within an immediate walkable proximity to our large Congress Center. And then lastly, on community, we really looked closely at an association's impact. And I know, again, a lot of us are doing this globally, but what is it that is a perfect alignment between the mission of an organization and our underserved communities in the district? So, for example, if we are looking at a financial institution or a financial association who's having their meeting in Washington, D.C., they actually then went after the event was over and went into our local churches and taught financial literacy to our local residents, and only enhanced what they left behind. Because yes, economic impact is something, but social impact lasts so much longer. So again, in the United States, we tend to look at our neighbors across the pond, across the globe, and really adapt and adopt some of those concepts. And so that's what we did during the pandemic, and now coming out of it, really maximizing on those.
And you mentioned really that global influence and the ICA community and the learnings you bring to your backyard, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Anything going the other way? What are some of your key global initiatives going out of DC?
Yeah. So, sometimes it just really gets back to basics. So we've taken this opportunity to, knowing that our resources, both financial and human resources, are all stretched. This is something that we're all facing in this day and age. Is how do we really prioritize our key markets, and where do we need to be, and where do we need to invest our time? And so we've taken a step back, and instead of spreading ourselves thin, we're really diving headfirst into a couple particular markets that have proven fruitful as we come out of this pandemic. And then as we evolve and change, then we can add emerging markets. We can add markets that have been successful, but perhaps haven't navigated the pandemic as well as some of the other parts of the world. And so we continue to evaluate where we want to invest that time and really maximize. So we are very intentional in what we're doing right now. It's a lot of data-based decision-making right now. And then eventually we'll get back to a place where we can perhaps expand a little bit more in the future.
Thank you. And here's a quick shout out from Tommy Goodwin. He's saying Xenia and Melissa together. Yes. Thank you, Tommy. We love you too.
Tommy's one of our favorites.
So you touched already when we were talking about innovative approaches, you talked about one of your pillars being communities. I know when I'm on LinkedIn, I love seeing everything that comes from your social media posts, and really that engagement and connection and adding value for your local communities. Could you just share a little bit more what has inspired that specific strategy?
Yeah. And I love this because this is something that we really dived into recently. We took a little pause with it, but I'm incredibly thankful to work for an organization that focuses not just on leisure marketing, but also on MICE marketing. And it's somewhat hard to find. A lot of DMOs put all the emphasis on leisure. And we actually put a position at Destination DC a few years ago that was media relations specifically for trade. And it has done so much to elevate our profile within the community. And so Susan puts we recognize, and she puts a spin on a lot of what the leisure initiatives are and adapts it to the MICE market. I know around the world there is some great debate as to whether MICE is separate or equal to leisure, right? The economic development agencies, claim MICE. In the US, we all tend to be grouped together, whereas I know that's not always the case. But our philosophy is that a great leisure destination makes a great meetings destination, right? And so Susan really looks at what's going on like in our market that we can, adapt. How can we take our campaign that is, all about the local experiences and add that and enhance that for the meeting space. And she's really done a great job on that. And one of the things that we do is every Wednesday, we call it Washington Wednesday internally, but she looks at a big splash that we can make. So our whole team actually posts the same thing so that it's not just me, one singular individual talking about, whatever it is. Like this week, it was about the theater scene and the great community that's around that and the fact that people are going back and doing cultural activities. But she creates those posts for our entire team and much of our organization. And so when we all go out to our community, it's not just me, but our impact is so much greater. And so she focuses on things like that. And it's really nice because she's ingrained in the marketing department, but she has a meetings expertise. So we have that access back and forth.
And I'm sorry.
No
it
worries.
happens. And thank you, Santil, for giving a shout out to Melissa as well. I'm sure she appreciates you listening in from Europe in the evening. As we are winding down, I do want to ask my standard question because we are on Hello America's What's Cooking. Any favorite foods, restaurants, recipes, because you have been posting about that scene as well. And I know there's a big foodie scene in Washington.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of my favorite topics. As we were just talking before we went live, it's oftentimes too much of a good topic. But, I tend to, I do love to cook. I tend to cook more in the wintertime because I like, braising. I like big stews, big flavors, things like that, a nice big glass of wine. But in the summertime, I actually tend to take advantage of more of what the city has to offer because oftentimes it just gets too hot to cook in your own house. So I love, eating and dining al fresco outdoors, heading down to our wharf or one of our waterfronts, grabbing a patio table with friends. And we are very fortunate in that we're one of the Michelin destinations. And so we've added some new Michelin restaurants. So when you want to have more of an investment meal, that you have that avenue. And then Michelin is great because they have the Bib Gourmand, which are a little bit more approachable, a little bit more affordable. So if you're just looking at a Tuesday night out with friends and you want something when it's a, beautiful, sunny, warm summer night and a nice, crisp glass of wine, that's what I tend to do. But so it's a mix between that. And then I live in the heart of the city. I'm very fortunate in that I have a very small little community. I live 6 blocks from the office. And so I tend to do everything within a short radius of my house and work. But there's some great local restaurateurs, great localized chefs that are all within a few, walking blocks of my home and the office. And so when I'm not, splurging on a Michelin rated restaurant, I tend to eat local and oftentimes, ethnic if I can. Actually meeting a girlfriend tonight for Vietnamese. So I'll let you know how that goes.
Oh, thank you. And I think we'll have to have you back as a guest and some of our other guests as well and talk only food. Thank you so much, Melissa. This was excellent. And I'm sure people got inspired. And if they want to know anything more, they can visit the Destination DC website at washington.org. Or they can connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm sure you will be happy to help them out. And thank you so much for being a guest. this has been our last Hello Americas before the summer break. We will be back in September. If anybody in the audience wants to join us as a guest, please feel free to email me at xenia.p@ecaworld.org. I would like to thank all of our audience and viewers for being so diligent in tuning in every Thursday. And Melissa, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks, Xenia, to you and the whole ICA team, and look forward to seeing you in Krakow. And I applaud you all to make the decision to stay and support our friends in Poland. So
excellent. And please, yes, I have to say we have so much in store for Krakow, and please stay tuned to hear what is happening for the North American chapter as well.
Great. Sounds good.